Alright guys, so now we are going to practice just the discriminant over and over and over again. And then using those rules, if it's positive, if it's zero, or if it's negative, as to what type of solutions, and then we're going to go through and find those solutions. So, okay, so find the discriminant. So remember, that is b squared minus 4ac. That is the part underneath the radical. So then, that means, I'm just going to go off to the side. A is 1, B is negative 8, and C is 17. Alright, so, pardon me. So I'm going to use the discriminant. So that is negative 8 squared. So that's b squared minus 4ac. So that's negative 8 squared minus 4 times 1 times 17. All right? So that's 64 minus 64 minus 4 times 1 times 17. And I get, I'll just say 64 minus that is negative 4. Okay, so since the discriminant is negative 4, okay, since it is a negative number, that means that we get 2 imaginary solutions. Okay, so that means that it crosses above the x-axis. That means it's not going to cross the x-axis at all. And I can show that on the calculator in a second, okay? Actually, let me show it to you right now. So, that means that if I pull up the graphing calculator, alright, if I were to put this into y equals, and I were just to put this in, x squared minus 8x plus 17, x squared minus 8x plus 17, let me zoom that, it's a pretty good picture, but let me just zoom standard, so that's 6. Okay, if you notice, it does not cross the x-axis. So if you see that it does not cross, then you automatically know it's imaginary. It's imaginary because it doesn't cross. So even though we were able to get a number and we can get a solution, it's an imaginary solution because it doesn't touch our x-axis, okay? So that's just proof as to what we're talking about, okay? So now let's actually go through and solve it. Let's go through and find this. So, because it says to actually give the number. So, x equals, this is referring back to the quadratic formula, the opposite of b, so that's a positive 8, plus or minus, and we already know this part, b squared minus 4ac, we already know that that's negative 4. So we don't really have to work that out. I can just go ahead and put that discriminant in here, all over 2 times 1, so that's just the number 2. So now let's just simplify. 8 plus or minus, the square root of negative 4 is 2i. It's I because of the negative, it's 2 because of the square root of 4, all over 2. And then we have practiced in the past, both of those divide by 2, so you finish that out by actually dividing it out, and you get 4 plus or minus I. Okay, because those two divide and it's just one I or just I. Okay, so here's the discriminant that it asked for. Here's the type, 2 imaginary, and then there actually that is the imaginary solution. 4 plus I and 4 minus I. Okay, so let's do that again. Let's A is, I'm going to write it across the top so we can see it. A is 1, B is 4, and C is 3. Okay, so I'm going to put it into b squared, so that's 16, because that's, so I'm going to put it into b squared minus 4ac. So 4 squared is 16 minus 4 times 1 times 3. Alright, so I'm just going to put that straight into my calculator. 16 minus 4 times 1 times 3. That is the number 4, and that's just 16 minus 12. Okay, so since the discriminant is 4, That's a positive number, so that means that we have two real solutions. Okay, so we've got two real solutions, so we can actually go through and find that. So if we were to put this into our calculator, it will cross twice. So let me show that to you. Here it is. So let me, oh, it's hard to see, but, so y equals, let me put this one in, x squared plus 4x plus 4x plus 3. So it's a lot of what we talked about last class, or last unit, and if you notice, it does cross, and it crosses twice, so those are the two real solutions where we're seeing it cross, okay? So we're just going to use the quadratic formula to find those numbers. So we know that it is x equals the opposite of b, so that's -4 plus or minus the square root. We already know that underneath that root is the number 4, all over 2 times 1, because that's what a is, okay? So now this will just simplify. -4 plus or minus, the square root of 4 is the number 2, all over 2. So really, now that we just have regular numbers, now we actually just work the numbers out. We'll get two different numbers. We'll say x equals -4 plus 2 divided by 2, and x equals -4 minus 2 divided by 2. So we add it in one time, we subtract it in the other. So -4 plus 2 is -2, divided by 2 is -1. There's one of the solutions. -4 minus 2 is -6, divided by 2 is -3. Okay, so those are the two real solutions. And if you look at that graph, okay, if you look at this graph, it's crossing at -1 and -3. Okay, so those two places where it's crossing are those two numbers. So the quadratic formula can get you the solutions. The graph, in this case, could have gotten us the solutions. We also could have factored it. So this is an example of how you could use a bunch of different methods to get that same answer, okay? But the quadratic formula can get us there. All right, so let's do it just a couple more times on these last problems. Okay. All right, so A is, I'm going to write it above. A is -1, B is 2, and C is also -1. So the discriminant B squared would be 2 squared, so that's 4, minus 4 times -1 times -1. Okay, so 4 minus 4 times -1 times -1. 4 minus 4 times -1 times -1 is the number 0. Okay, so if you look back at the other page, when it says 0, that means the root goes away, so you only have to work with the front of your quadratic formula, so that only has one real solution. Okay, so it only has one real solution, so there's the discriminant. Again, your graphing calculator will show us that if I put it in, it should only cross one time. So let me move this over. Oh, let me make it so you can see it. Okay, so what is it? It's -x squared plus 2x minus 1. So if you notice, it only crosses it one time. Okay, so this one time stands for the double root. This one answer we're going to get counts for both because of the x squared, okay? So let's make sure that when we do the quadratic formula, it matches the graph that we have up here. So we get x equals the opposite of b, so that's -2 plus or minus the square root of 0, because that's the discriminant, all over 2 times -1. Because a is -1 in this case. Well, the discriminant goes away, because the square root of 0 just goes away, that really means we just have negative 2 over negative 2. So our one solution is the number 1, and that's a double root. Remember, I call that a DR. This 1 stands for both answers, and if you notice, that is where it crosses. That's that one place where the graph touches. So this one spot is the double root. Okay, and it's the number 1. So again, if you had your calculator, you could have just turned it. Or if you wanted to factor, you could have turned that, but the formula also got us that answer, okay? So let's do the last one. All right, so this last one is, let's see, A is a 1, B is a 6, and C is a 4. So B squared, so 6 squared is 36, minus 4 times 1 times 4. And I'm just going to put that into my calculator, minus 4 times 1 times 4. And I get the number 20. So since 20 is a, sorry, I got distracted. Okay, since 20 is a positive number, that gives us 2 real solutions. So that's our type, 2 real solutions. Okay, because it's positive, so all positives give us 2 real solutions. So now let's go through and let's find those real solutions. Using the quadratic formula, x equals the opposite of b, so that's negative 6, plus or minus the square root of 20, you've already found that, all over 2 times 1, because that's n. Okay? Now, this is the only one out of these that we actually need to simplify 20. Okay, so remember, think to yourself, okay, 20 is, let me see, where can I write this, okay? The square root of 20, remember, is the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. Okay, so you want to think of your factor pairs, so that turns into a 2 root 5. Okay, so that's negative 6 plus or minus 2 root 5 all over 2. And now we've done this in the past where we've noticed, okay, both of these will divide by 2. So think of it like this. Okay, this will divide by 2 plus this will divide by 2. So you go ahead and you divide each pair by that denominator 2, and that's as simple as it will go. So negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3, plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1, so you don't need to write it, you just write the root 5. And that is what x equals. Okay? You get 2 answers because one's plus root 5, the other's minus. So if you were to use your calculator, you would see it cross twice, but it's just not an exact number. Okay? So it does cross twice, but it's just not a pretty number. It's this ongoing decimal. It's irrational. It just keeps going and going. Okay, so that is a practice of discriminant to decide the number of solutions or the type, and then you can use the discriminant to finish solving, finish using that formula, okay? So that's what we are going to practice, and we're going to put it all together with that quadratic formula stuff, okay?